introduce Nathan and Alice. Nathan studied advertising at Uclan from 2013 to 2016, and when he graduated, he went to work in Manchester for a while, which was it Havas, Nathan?
Havas.
Yeah, as a copywriter, and then after that, we needed help in China, and I just said off the cuff during a conference week, actually, you don't fancy doing some work in China? And Nathan said yes, more or less straight away. And then Nathan met Sean, who's in camera now, and helped out with advertising, teaching advertising over in China. And then Nathan came back and then decided to make the move from Manchester to London, and bit the bullet and went to look for agency work in London, which is where we're going to take off. And I'd like to welcome Alice. And Alice, no one's given me an intro for you, so would you mind introducing yourself to the group, please?
Yeah, of course. So yeah, I'm Alice. I've worked. I'm actually an account director at Pulse, where Nathan currently works as well. So I'm a colleague of Nathan's, but I've worked in agencies for the last 8 years. Most probably well known was FCB Inferno, that I worked for 5 years, which I'll talk a little bit about shortly. I also worked at Comic Relief, which I know isn't a creative agency, but they have done a little bit of creative stuff. And then now at Pulse, where I've been for a year and a half, working with Nathan on the news items, which we'll go into in a bit as well. But yeah, that's me really in a nutshell.
Well, thanks for that. And I'm going to turn my camera off now, and I'm going to go. You'll all be pleased to hear that I'm going to go mute, and then we'll just get started. Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
All right, let's see if this will work. Is that everyone seeing this? I don't even know how I'm going to be able to. Yeah,
we're seeing that.
Lovely. So let's get cracking then. So obviously these kind of things, there is going to be some technical difficulties, but bear with us. Guy's not driving this deck, so it should be a smooth operation. We shall see. So just a bit about who Pulse are, what we do, this kind of thing. We are News UK's in-house creative agency, and we're part of the AND Partnership Network, which is sort of a WPP-funded organisation. Currently, we're a team of around 70 creative individuals focusing on creative digital design, print design, content creation, strategy, and client services. Just a couple of our clients. Anyone, if you want to look us up later, we work for The Times and The Sunday Times, TalkSport, Virgin Radio, The Fifth, which are like an influencer marketing company, and we do News UK's internal stuff as well. As we've we've just done a bit of an intro for it, but me and myself and Alice being the account director and me being the copywriter. But let's get into it. So when me and Alice sat down to sort of plan this presentation out, we've talked about making our own mark. Some of the stuff we've been involved in before we worked together was having a lot of back and forth, and then just Alice decided to pull this massive one out of nowhere that's kind of pissed on everything I've ever done. So I'm going to just pass over to her, and she's going to take you through a little campaign you may have heard of called This Girl Can.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah. I feel like there's a funny thing in the world of advertising where you tend to assume that everyone knows everything that everyone knows that when you've done a campaign, or everyone knows the campaigns that you've worked on. So I'm going to try and talk this through as if you might not know about this campaign. So forgive me if you do, and I'm just repeating things that you've already heard of. But This Girl Can was actually the first thing I ever worked on at FCB Inferno. I started just after they'd won the account. And it's actually an account, the client was Sport England, so it's actually a government arm that set this up. But I think some of the beauty about this campaign is that actually not many people know that, because it's not your traditional government kind of advertising or advertising campaign. If you go on to the next slide, Nate, the original brief for this campaign was that back when the brief was pitched in 2014, there was a massive gender gap in activity between men and women, and 2 million fewer women than men were being active, and that was the brief. They basically said, we've got hundreds and thousands of documents of research. Here it is. Go away and work out what the issue is and what we can do to solve it. Which I guess creatively may not have been the most interesting thing in the agency at the time. We had kind of the likes of Oreo, BMW, Nivea, all sorts of things that you could think maybe be a bit more creative. So when this came across the desk, it wasn't something that everyone jumped at necessarily. But I think what was powerful about this campaign was that the strategy department went through that research, went through every document that they gave us, and came out with this kind of red thread that I think is solely the reason that this campaign was a huge success. It was, the entire campaign was based in this powerful insight that actually the fear of judgment was what was holding women back from exercising, and that covered a numerous amounts of fears. And actually, there's a case study in here that I've just thought would be a better way of summarising it rather than talking you through it all. But before we play that, I think, as I said, and I think there will be time for questions at the end if anyone has any questions about this, but I think what was absolutely paramount, as I said, was that insight remained true and still remains true to the work that they're doing today, and everything comes back to that, and the creative is completely based on that insight. And that, as a proposition, kind of when it was presented to the great creatives, is how we ended up where we are. So rather than me kind of talk about it, we haven't got the ad in here because I was, given what I said at the beginning, I assume some of you may have seen it. If you haven't, go and have a look on YouTube. But this is a bit of just a quick 2-minute case study that we entered for an award, to kind of show you exactly what we did. And I think actually what's quite funny is that you have to remember this was a case study we produced in 2015. So some of the headings for, i.e. Twitter, look very dated, and it's making me feel a little bit old. But anyway, go and play the video, and then we'll go on.
2 million fewer women are playing sport regularly. That's compared to men. Despite this, 75% of 14 to 40-year-old women say they want to be more active. So, what is putting them off?
Well, lots of things, actually, all with one common theme: the fear of being judged. So how could Sport England inspire women to give judgment the finger and give exercise another go?
Let's go! I'm the hottest round, and if you want me...
We showed that healthy bodies aren't always ripped bodies. We celebrated cellulite, jiggled the jiggly bits, and soaked the screen with sweat. Poster sites featured women in all their unphotoshopped glory. Seeded content told real stories of the personal barriers they'd overcome. And a social media algorithm found women expressing exercise anxieties, so we could reply with words of support. It's fair to say the word got out.
This campaign is genius. That is so empowering.
It's called This Girl Can. And the message is, if this girl can, anyone can.
My reaction was finally something that empowers everyone.
And women everywhere were inspired to put their fears behind them and become girls who can.
And it's just a really fun, amazing, uplifting advert that really gets me going in the morning.
So, I mean, I could talk about this campaign for hours, and I won't, obviously won't. But a couple of the out of home posters that we ran, Nathan will show you as we go through. But I think if you go back to the original one, no. Yeah, I think this was probably the iconic one of the campaign that you may or may not recognise. I say iconic, you may not recognise it at all. What was interesting about this is that there was an absolute mandatory from the client that all the cast members in this ad had to be women that had never been ever been seen on a casting website. They, even if they'd never been cast for anything, they couldn't have been found anywhere to have done anything similar before. This was about, you know, street casting, going out finding women, just doing what they were doing and using them and giving them a platform to inspire other women. So this woman was called Sam. She was found in a park run in Bournemouth. I think it was kind of universally accepted that her ad was probably one of the more revealing ones, because, you know, her line there, "I jiggle, therefore I am," was kind of, you know, at the time no one had seen anything like it on TV or in print or anywhere. And I think actually it's probably a testament to the progression of this industry, that actually now we are probably seeing more of these women, and certainly in advertising. The copy of the lines, I think, were also what helped this campaign be such a success. And they were written by a phenomenal copywriter called Simon Senamore, who him and his creative partner Ray Chan were the team behind this campaign, who have now been poached and working as creative directors for Apple in San Francisco. So they've done very well. Two really nice guys. They wrote these lines fully off the back of interviews with these women, lengthy interviews with these women about their own struggles, and the lines are born out of their own fears and judgment themselves. So another thing that they could completely stand by and believe in. And a range of women. That the bottom left one there, "Still slow, still lapping everyone on a couch," was actually an evolution of the first ad we did. The first iteration of this, which was "I may be slow, but I'm lapping everyone on the couch." This was the kind of the second iteration of it as it progressed over a number of years. It's, you know, as Nathan said, it's 5 years old. It's still kind of, it's just gone from strength to strength. The campaign has been, I think, 4 TV ads. The social gathering and kind of community is absolutely massive. They've had partnerships with, you know, commercial clients now. They've got partnerships with Disney. It was massive. But I think everything they've ever done has been rooted in that original insight, which I just think, as I said, is the reason that it's continued to be so successful. There's a board here. Just again, this is kind of all the kind of stats are slightly outdated because it was a board that we had when we entered the award into Cannes back in 2015. But it's just a bit of a snapshot of exactly what we did. It was a completely integrated campaign in press, TV, digital, social. There was an app that was built. There was an entire website that was built and dedicated around it. There was kind of what we called where you can see what Vanessa versus What You, Lisa versus Finding Time, kind of barrier films that we all created bespoke about these individual women to try and expand and try and touch, and, you know, so many women across the country who may have found similar barriers to exercise, and just trying to encourage them and get them to overcome it. The girls that we worked with were phenomenal, and it was, as I said, a complete integrated campaign with PR and media as well to make this as successful as it was, and it was a success. Certainly from a creative perspective. I mean, I think the success, you can talk about the numbers of, I mean, Nathan can go on and to the next slide to see the kind of creative awards it ran. It won, sorry, within its first year. So it did phenomenally well creatively and within our industry. But I think, you know, the success of the campaign was all about narrowing that gender gap, which it has done drastically in the last 5 years and continues to do so, which is ultimately what the clients wanted. I know this is an advertising course, so I said, you know, what you guys want to know is, you know, how well that it did creatively, and it did do very, very well creatively, and continues to do so. It won some extreme number of awards, and it was something that was incredibly I'm incredibly privileged to have been a part of it right from the word go, and ran the third iteration and the third film myself with the team, which was just amazing to kind of watch it develop as I developed in my career. So it was amazing. And I think someone said to me after the first two iterations of it, if you like, so within about 18 months of it, someone just said, "You'll never work on anything as good as this ever again. You've absolutely peaked in your career." And that was 3 years in, and I thought, that's great. That's really encouraging, but it's probably true. I don't think I have or will work on anything quite as unbelievable as that. So yeah, it was a real privilege. But yeah, a creative genius account to work on. Great clients, great integration between media and PR as well, and it just all kind of tied up and was brilliant. So at the end, if there's any questions, obviously very happy to talk about it. as I said, I will talk about it for ages, but I will let Nathan crack on with his next bit.
Yeah, I mean, in an attempt not to be outdone by what was quite a monstrous campaign, but you know, here's trying to that anyway. I just, like all good campaigns, there's a story behind how it came to be. So this was an ad we ran for the Times and the Sunday Times, the back end of 2018 into 2019, and it was basically the time of, you know, Brexit was still a if buts maybe. Theresa May was still the Prime Minister. There was a lot of confusion, as there still is now, to be honest. But this whole idea, and it was Andy who's in the chat at the minute, it was him and Paul, another one of the creators at Pulse. It was their idea basically to visualize every single politician as animals, because, you know, the House of Commons is quite a wild place, and it was an incredibly successful campaign. You know, we did, you know, hundreds of print executions for it. There was a TV ad, social bits, radio stuff, but inevitably, when it gets to the point of moving it on to the next thing, it was always going to be a bit of a struggle. And the insight that we went down for evolving the Politics Turn campaign was, well, politics is still, if not even more of a mess than it was 6 months ago. So we sort of took the politicians out of the House of Commons and moved them into the jungle. And again, it was a similar sort of story of, we had lots of press iterations of it, social bits, but we then wanted like a bigger standout piece for it. And originally there was talk of projecting this advert onto the side of the Houses of Parliament one night. And we got to, I think maybe 2 hours before, we'd had like, you know, a projection van set up, we had a camera crew ready to go. And then someone decided to ask the legal team at News UK if we were allowed to do this. And of course, they said no, because you can't project things onto the House of Commons. To which we said, well, yes, that's why we knew it was illegal. We weren't going to ask permission anyway. But so that died a very painful death, literally 2 hours before it was going to happen. But, you know, in the spirit of Britishness and trying to find a solution, we were then presented with the opportunity of completely doing a takeover of Westminster Station in this whole Westminster Jungle campaign, using all the assets of the campaign. And when I say like a takeover, it like literally every single element of Westminster Station was done up in this Times politics campaign, down to the escalator railings and the ticket barriers, to, you know, the station walkways and the Westminster roundels, the outside gates, the stairs leading into the station, even down to the station announcers were done in sort of animal voices and, you know, beware of the animal kind of stuff. And I think it's, in terms of stuff that I've worked on, certainly it was the most ambitious, most bespoke bit of work I've ever worked on, just because of the amount of elements that went into it, and had such like a bespoke media plan and, you know, plan for it that worked at every single opportunity. So, and I think it never would have happened had we have gotten away with doing a projection on the side of the House of Commons. So we're kind of thankful for that in a way, and just being there on the day, seeing, you know, thousands of people interacting with everything that was going on around the station was, it's just, people always ask me what's one of the perks of working in advertising. It's like I always get a kick out of seeing my own work live and in the real world, and when it's like a full station takeover, you kind of think, wow, that was quite special. But we're going to sort of move on now into the bit that we called making a mark in a global pandemic. And I think we're almost 12 months in, certainly at Pulse, to the whole working from home situation. And I think when we first were in that back in March last year, there was a lot of uncertainty and a lot of questions as to, well, how would we be able to do work, and what would we be actually creating and putting out into the world? But in the midst of all of it, I think me and Alice have both worked on quite a bit together over the last 12 months, stuff that we've really enjoyed working on. So we're going to just take you through some of our personal highlights over the last 12 months and show that actually, even when you're not in an office environment of working with people face to face on a daily basis, we still can do creative work. So So our first little bit is for TalkSport, which, as you can see, they describe themselves as the world's biggest sports radio station. They do, live commentary on a whole range of sporting events, daily shows. They generally quite a good listen if you're into sports. So we do all their work. Now, what's tricky about being the world's biggest sports radio station is 12 months ago, when everything just shut down and there was no sports, they were sort of scraping the barrel as to what they were going to talk about. I think at one point they were like debating having snail races on their show and commentating over that just because it was something to talk about, which is about as desperate as it gets, I think. But they persevered, they got through, and then when things started coming back, when the football came back, when cricket and Formula One and all these things started opening up and coming back onto screens and airwaves, they decided that they was going to change the approach of the station. It was, it's 2020. We want to attract younger people and more modern sort of audiences. So what we had to sort of manage was a new photo shoot for every one of their new presenters across 5 days. So one studio, 5 days, 50 presenters, and over 2,000 photographs. And Alice, I think you'll remember, it was just me and you there at the time, manning all these prima. So naturally, there was quite a few prima donnas in this whole TalkSport, their new vision for the future. We're not going to mention any names, but there's two of them. But I think that was a challenge in itself, manning all these different people in when you're normally on a shoot. There's a lot of planning that goes into it. You have much more time than you would not than what we had to work with. It was, like I said, 5 days to try and get all these presenters out the door and shot ready for what they're now, this new look and feel that they're now rolling out. And then on top of that, we also, I think, Alex, you'll probably be able to explain this better than me, given that you work with the clients on a more face-to-face basis. But this is like, there's five ads there that we've done in the past. That's maybe half of what we've done in the past 10 days for TalkSport. Like, we do a lot of ads for them. And I think I've put at the top that when you work with clients that revolve around news and, client affairs, like, time's very rarely on your side with these things. It can feel a bit rushed. It can be just get it out the door and out the way. But I think ultimately we still do a good job in making things look slick and presentable. I think, would you agree on that, Alice?
Yeah, I definitely would agree. I mean, just as an example, so the daily press deadline to supply the ads for the papers for the next day. So I mean, we work in the Times and the Sun are two of the papers that are in house. So these ads go in both of those papers every day, which reach an audience of over 8.5 million people a week. So the turnover of ads is phenomenal, and especially with talking about sport, there's so many last minute changes, and even more so with COVID as well. Games being called off because teams have got COVID, and therefore that fixture is now no longer relevant. And trying to make all these changes last minute, it's been quite a journey. But as Nathan said, like, the amount of work that we turn over is phenomenal. And they may not seem. You can craft a press ad for days and days and days, and with TalkSport, it's just about having a template that works, that you can rotate copy in and out of, because that's the kind of pace that we're running at. And it doesn't always work. Sometimes it doesn't always work, but I think 90% of the time we get the ads out, and hopefully they're all correct. There isn't any copy issues on them.
But I think even when this is when we have a bit more time, this is a prime example of this. So this was back in October, I think we made this, and it was basically just, we found out at the start of the week that TalkSport would have exclusive rights to these 3 games. So, and it's got to go out on the Saturday. So even then, you're only looking at 5 days, really. I think our design director, a chap called Matt, turned this around in 3 days, just from literally it going to him as an idea and a stick figure drawing, and he turns this around. Like, most people, most design directors would want to spend, or retouchers would want to spend 2-3 weeks on something like this, but somehow we're consistently able to turn things around in a very little amount of time, but yet they still look, they still have a premium feel. They still look like quality ads.
But also the idea generation of that, as Nathan said, TalkSport don't find out they've got those fixtures and secure the rights to air those until the Monday, and it's got to go out by the end of the week. So it's all kind of very last minute reactive stuff.
But then, as on top of all that, we do have a laugh with them at times. This was just a screenshot from one of our Christmas ads for them. It was basically just putting their presenters in Christmas jumpers, but any which way that they can have a laugh at themselves along with us. So the screenshot in the corner is from Jamie O'Hara, who's another one of their presenters, having a pop at Alan Brazil, who's the big chap in the ad with the swollen looking face. I think our clients love this kind of stuff where they have a laugh. They appreciate the creative side of things, but when their own talent is jumping on the back of it and promoting it, it's a massive win for them. So that's sort of a talk. What's all right. Alice is now going to talk you through quite a new client for us in Times Radio.
Yeah, so Times Radio was it's a new radio station that launched last year in June, and that was had been kind of in the pipeline to kind of go on air for a long time. Obviously with COVID, it got pushed back. So it went live in June, but I think the creative challenge with this one was having a heritage brand like the Times, and then having to work out exactly where Times Radio would sit amongst that heritage brand, but also without kind of replicating this and doing the same job. So Andy, who's on this call, also helped work on this. So feel free, Andy, to chip in if I don't do this justice. But it was a long campaign that ended up starting with, we began it with a soft launch, so went out to just the kind of current Times audience, because we used the kind of the own media that they had in the Times, and ran these press ads with a very kind of approach that you can see there, with the kind of heritage of the Times speaking up since 1785, but kind of trying to bring the modernity of the radio station into it. We went back and forth for a long time on trying to make sure that the audience would understand that Times Radio is not the Times, as in the newspaper, on radio. That was a big kind of a hurdle that we had to get over, because the Times is a paid for subscription product and the radio is a free product. So what we didn't want people to do is decide that the radio, they could get everything that they get from the Times paper on the radio station, and therefore not have to pay for the subscription. So it took us a long time to kind of establish exactly where the radio station was going to sit amongst that heritage brand. But we did, and it's just tonally a different stance. It was just kind of an extension of the paper, so it wasn't just reading what people have written in the paper, but also the kind of ongoing debate throughout the day and kind of live news updates. It has massive competition with Radio 4 and LBC, who are already kind of very well established radio stations. So launching a brand new radio station in COVID had huge challenges, and then when the soft launch ended and they decided to not only just talk to the Times audience that it currently existed, but to go kind of national, they wanted to put it on TV. So Andy, I think probably him and his partner Poole probably wrote 17 different scripts as to what this television advert could look like. And I think creatively there were so many beautiful things that we could have done with it. It ended up being very functional. I hope that's fair to say, Andy. Very functional. It heroed the presenters, which is kind of ironic given that some of the presenters that they'd recruited for Times Radio would have been known more for their voice than their face. And I mean that in the nicest way possible. But the ad itself, which Nathan will play you, was a result of minimal preparation. The rewriting of a script more times than I care to remember, and working under very strict conditions with the kind of director maybe going in to brief the team and then coming out of the room and just being the cameraman and the talent. So it was very, very all over the place. But the TV ad that launched the station nationwide went on air in October, and this is the outcome.
Since 1785, the Times has been essential reading.
Now, it's essential listening.
Times Radio chooses conversation over confrontation.
Covers Westminster and beyond. Ask the right questions.
To keep you well informed.
We give words space and let the stories do the talking.
Times Radio. Know your Times.
This is Times Radio Drive.
So yeah, so on Times Radio, it's still new, it's still launching, and yeah, they decided to launch with this guy as their first guest on the opening day, which obviously drew in all the viewers. But if you guys want to help us, go and tune into Times Radio. You can find it all on your DAB radios online or via the app, as the TV said, and you can help us drive our listening figures, because I still think they're a little bit low at the minute. So yeah, any help much appreciated.
I think just to touch on that as well, you think you've done all this great work to, launch a new product in quite a tricky time. You've made everything crystal clear as to what people do in order to find the station and listen. And then it turns out that in the first week of the launch, if you asked your smart speaker to play Times Radio, it took you to Chris Miles's XFM radio show. So while our clients are screaming at us saying we've done something wrong and we need to fix it, Chris Miles is sat with his feet up laughing as his listening figures are going up. So, all fun and games at the Pulse Towers. And then from one radio station to another, we're going to move on to Virgin Radio. So back in the start of 2019, they made quite a big investment in signing Chris Evans as the new sort of the face of Virgin Radio. They've moved him from BBC Radio 1, Radio 2, I can't remember which one he'd come from, but as their new breakfast show host. But not content with just one BBC radio presenter, they signed Graham Norton in November. So we just sort of wrapped up the whole launch campaign for announcing Graham Norton as the new weekend radio host for Virgin Radio. And again, that's similar to, the talk clock shoot we talked about earlier and the Times Radio shoot, doing that in a quite a tricky time and with a minimal time in the studio, everyone being social distance. Again, proved challenging, but we kind of got our way through it. It was a series of, stills for press with some of these cool little, they're going to play some little digi videos that I think our brief to Graham was just dick about a bit on set and we'll film it and capture everything for you. So they've gone down really well. Again, it's just showing the struggles that we've had to try and get work out in, tricky circumstances with very little time as well. But as you can see here, I think Alice can run through some of this. We think it's worked surprisingly well, certainly for Graham Norton, better than anyone thought it would do given the circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we can take credit for all of these results as much as we'd like to. I think them signing Graham Norton has done phenomenally well for Virgin Radio as a brand and as a radio station. I think it was all about Chris Evans before, but Graham Norton's helped kind of scale that reach slightly. But as I said, I mean, these, as I said, will not be completely down to advertising as much as we'd like to think it would be. But they had a dramatic increase in audience listenership, and they had an extraordinary amount of impressions across all of their site. I think it was only over 5 million impressions across their social channels combined for that weekend, which was just, as it says, they're over a third of their regular monthly figures. I think they hit 4 times their normal listenership, and the clients were absolutely ecstatic. And those social videos that Nathan just showed were they were very influential in driving those click-throughs and listens, and that can be measured. So we did have a bit of a hand in that. But Graham as a personality is a massive coup for Virgin Radio. So, and it was a real pleasure. I think it's always nice to hear when you work with a celebrity whether or not they were nice. And Nathan and I are both on the shoot and can confirm he is very, very nice. He is exactly what you'd want him to be. He didn't want anything. Just wanted a black coffee, which was nice. So easy enough to work with. And yeah, moving forward, there's potential for us to be doing something with Chris and Graham in the future. So watch this space for that.
Indeed. So we just wanted to sort of take it away from what we've done and maybe wrap up with a bit of advice for you guys listening. Obviously, people may have touched on these points throughout the week, and we apologise if we're repeating with ourselves, but these are just sort of things that we think you can do to make your mark. Obviously, it's not the easiest time in the world to be going out looking for jobs, but there is still opportunity out there. Things are starting to pick back up again on the job front, so it's not all doom and gloom. But these are some things that we think can help you make a mark in potentially speaking to, for interviews, to recruiters maybe, but things to help you stand out a little. So something that I've learned is like side projects or hobbies that you do really do help make an impression with you. Whether you're speaking to the head of talent at an agency or a creative director or even, a junior creative, whoever it may be, people tend to have a genuine interest in what you get up to once you close your work laptop and switch off for the day. So I think you can use this to your advantage in showing people what you do outside of advertising and graphic design. And, sometimes even get that into your work as well. Having your own sort of injecting a bit of yourself into your work is not a bad thing. And I think it's something that people are scared to do because they want to differentiate themselves between, work and not working. But try and bring them together. Let people know what you're all about other than just working as a creative or a designer. But, and this is sort of where the seller point of this is, there's this term side hustle that has been thrown around a lot, far too much for my liking at the minute as well. You have people like D&AD awarding people for having side hustles. Now, in my day, a side hustle was selling Lucasades for £1.50 that you bought for £1 on the school playground. But today, it's like creating apps or, a new brand in their kitchen or whatever. It's like, don't let the fact that people are giving awards at side hustles force you into doing something that you don't want to. I know countless people that have tried to take up side projects, and it's like, oh, well, I'll make a new Instagram page for it, or I'll do, a splash website page on Squarespace for it, and they shove it down. They try and promote it to you. Can you follow this? Can you get involved with it? And within 3 months, it dies because they're not that passionate about it to turn it into something bigger. So, yes, do your own things and have your own interests, but do it because you want to, because it's what you're interested in doing.
This one's quite a big one for me. I'm far too sensitive to ever be a creative because I can't bear the thought of presenting an idea to someone and having it rejected. So every time I've ever been in a creative review, I really feel for you guys as whoever on this call is a creative, and I think I take my hat off to you every time you present an idea, and you've got to get good at it because that's what you've got to do. But in terms of having an idea of being better than others, I've seen so many people react differently to different ideas, and I think it's so vital to know that just because one person doesn't buy your idea doesn't make it a bad idea. Creativity is subjective, as it says here. It's so subjective, and so I hate to see creatives to get knocked back just because one creative director just didn't like that idea. The client may have loved it, but that creative director may not have liked it. So what I would just say is, if you have an idea, hang on to it. It may not work for something. It may work for something else later down the line. But don't ever think that one person shutting it down means that idea will never go anywhere. It's so important to hang on to them. And on that note, actually, having said no idea is better than others, I did take a leap and offer a creative line for one of the This Girl Can lines, because I was speaking to one of the ladies who was in that shot. And I actually wrote one of the lines for it, which I'm really buzzing about, clearly, and still absolutely love. And I wanted to win an award for that specific ad, but it didn't. But I wrote one of the ads that went on the poster, one of the lines for the poster ads. So I'm buzzing about that. It wasn't that I Jiggle one or any of the real notable ones, I will say, but it did make it into an out-of-home poster. So I'm buzzing about that.
And then another one of our final ones, personality is just as important as talent. So what I think we mean by this is, yes, you may be the most talented, hardworking creative in your class, in the agency or whatever, but if your personality doesn't match this, if you're just purely about the work, I think you should tend to struggle these days. So, ask yourself, what am I going to bring to the table? It's a bit like what we're saying about having hobbies and interests and letting people know about that. What are you going to bring to the table that isn't just work? Agencies culture is so important in these days, to the point where you have heads of culture is now sort of job descriptions in the bigger agencies, because they They want people to feel like they're part of a family together. You don't want to be that person that's working through lunch on a Friday because everyone else went to the pub without you. Like me and Alice, we both work with people like that. You just don't want to be that person. So show people that you're talented, you're hardworking, you want it, but also at the same time, you have to have another side to yourself. It's not necessarily a case of master of trades, jack of all trades, master of none, but it's like you need to be more than just, oh, I'm a really dedicated creative, want to work in advertising. Yes, people know that because you wouldn't have spoken to them about potentially working for that agency. It's having another side to your bow. And then just some closing thoughts we wanted to rack up on, just little bits of information you could maybe take away with you. Productivity doesn't determine your value. What I mean, but it's just the person that works, like going back to the previous point, the person that works the longest amount of hours isn't necessarily the best person in the agency. Sometimes it's okay to do nothing. It's not you can't have an answer to every brief. That's impossible. You're human beings at the end of the day. You're not robots that are programmed to churn out idea after idea after it. You can just be like, actually, I've not got anything for this. And even if you do something, not everything you make has to be significant or important or even good. Again, going back to the previous one, it's impossible to do, award-winning, results-driven, creative for every single brief you do, because sometimes it is just a case of getting it out of the door. But it's important that you understand which of those ones are, which briefs there is an opportunity to really make something good, and which is just a job that pays the bills and keeps the lights on. And then our last three, you can do things for yourself, like say have hobbies and interests, let people know about that. You're allowed to say no to things as well. I think some people are too scared to do this. And if you can't work on something, you don't have whether you don't have the time, you just don't feel right about it. You can say, actually, no, I can't work on this for whatever reason. And, you're allowed to rest at the end of the day. Work ends at 5:30, 6 o'clock, whenever it be. And I think it's so important that people understand that and do switch off at the end of the day, because, again, me and Alice have been there working late on pitches or for client presentations. You're there at, 11, 12 o'clock at night, early hours of the morning. It's just not good for you. You're not really contributing anything in terms of productivity or creativity when you get to that stage. So know when enough is enough and just close your laptop, switch off, and start doing things for yourself a bit more. So anything you want to add, Alice?
No, I think that's great. That sums it up. I think the key one that you said there is that productivity point. You see people all the time that, and especially when you're young and you're new in an agency, trying to show your worth just by staying later than everyone else, or working through things. I think, the point that Nathan made before, I think contributing to the culture of an agency is as important, if not, more important than necessarily some of the work you produce all the time. So do what's right for you, and just be part of the entire environment as much as anything.
So that sort of wraps everything up. Thank you very much for your time and listening to us ramble on about stuff. I guess we'll do some questions now, but I'll hand back over to Guy, I think.
Well, thank you, Alice and Nathan. Thanks for showing some great work, and thank you for the tips that you've given. They're very important, because it's not just about great work, is it? It's about other things as well. So let's hope. Did you create that digital tumbleweed I asked you to create?
So I've been doing this instead, so I didn't really have time for it.
Okay, and I'm sure we're going to get some questions. So, anybody in the group got any questions for Alice and Nathan? Oh, Sean. Hi.
Yeah, hi Nathan and Alice. Enjoyed your presentation, really good. I just like to ask Nathan, what was the most important thing you did on your advertising course at Uclan that in terms of skill sets that you use now? And as a second part of that question, is there anything you could have done when you were at university on the course? Was there anything missing there that you would value now that you might have done more of? So 2 parts to that question.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. The first part, the most important thing for me was the having crits and learning how to present work, because it's something we do certainly at Pulse on a very regular basis, presenting works to clients. So, it's not just a case of here's the work, put it on a table and assume people are going to understand it. It's talking through that, explaining how you got to where you got to and where you'd like to go with it. I think, doing that to Guy, Kevin, all the other tutors just sort of builds up a practice of it. For then I felt like I was equipped and good enough to go out to present to, seniors, creative directors, clients, whoever it may be. And then the second part, I guess something I wish I'd have maybe done more of. It's not necessarily a fault of the course. It was more, I like the conference week that we've got going on at the minute. There's, numerous people that give up their professionals that give up their time to come in. I wish maybe I'd have done a bit more picking their brains, but I think I get that when you're a student, you're a bit intimidated by, an executive creative director from a big London agency that are coming up. But I think if I could go back and do something again, it would definitely be spend more time chatting to, the professionals when they come in and picking their brains about stuff.
Okay.
Thanks, Nathan.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. We've got a couple of questions in the chat. Oh, hang on. I've got Carolus here. I think he's going to ask a question. Okay, Carolus, ask your question.
Yeah, hello. I did send this through the message, but might as well just ask. So how do you bridge that gap from going, I will design a poster, I will design an ad, to redesigning a whole tube station like you did? What's the middle of that process? If you understand the question.
Yeah, I think it can depend on a lot of things. I think you've got to have a strong idea to start with. If it's just something that's only going to work on as a print or a social ad, it's never going to, I think people could use the term, it's got to have legs. So, which the politics term campaign, we felt like it did. But then going from taking it to press to, because I think when you have something that you believe in and then your clients believe in, then they're willing to put their own necks on the line and give you the backing financially to say, actually, here's how we go and make it, go and take over a tube station, for example, or, do more outdoor stuff with things. But I think it starts from, you've got to have an idea that works, that is good, that people believe in.
Mm-hmm.
And you go, okay, so you can then put it to your client and say, how much are you going to back us and how much do you believe in it as much as we do? If that sort of makes sense.
I see, okay. It does. So basically the idea is the main aspect. The
idea is always part of everything. That's always key. But, the bigger and more creative the idea, naturally, the more scope you have and the more places you can take that.
Just to quickly follow up, let's say, would you recommend, let's say, personally just doing mock-ups of, let's say, going bigger before you suggest that to the client?
Yeah, I mean, when you say mock-ups, I wouldn't necessarily, it's something that we don't do. It's spend ages making things look perfectly polished. It can just be, a rough sketch or a scamp and just say, it may just be a case of, oh, here's an idea that we've had that we think, here's a territory it can lead into. Mm-hmm. Whether they buy into it then is the next battle you have, and that's where people like Alice and their accounting skills come into things.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Carolus. We've got Andy Peel on the line.
No, I was just going to say, because just to follow on from what Nathan said there, actually, for instance, that tube station ad that so it was spawned out of a brief that was, how do we take the campaign to the next level? And that was effectively our brief. It didn't give us there was no media space at that minute in time, and they basically said, go nuts and do whatever you want. At which point, I think I did a sort of a throwaway idea of, oh, I wonder if we take over the tube station, of which I sort of quickly mocked it up, left it on my desk, assuming it would never go anywhere. And one of our media team walked past it one day, Sarah Joppers, and she saw it and thought it was absolutely brilliant. At which point she then ran off to the media team and said, how on earth do I make this happen? At which point I had no idea this was going on. So effectively, that's what's brilliant about somewhere like Pulse, is that it hadn't actually gone through the correct director at that point. She'd seen something, thought it was potentially doable. And then, I don't know, it was probably 3 or 4 weeks later, at which point a new brief landed on our desk saying, we've got all the media for the tube station, here's what we need to do and here's how to create it. At which point we suddenly went, right, what else can we do? So that was a really interesting moment, that there was never actually a brief of let's take over the tube station. It was, what do we do to do something cool and exciting, at which point it takes lots of people in different roles to kind of make something happen, basically. Yeah. So I didn't actually have a question for Nathan. It just happened to appear there, and it was the sort of a weird moment that idea was born out of sort of 4 or 5 people's thinking they're going to go the extra mile and find something out and come back later, and it turned into something amazing. But yeah, it was one of those things that there was never a brief, and actually that would be something I would definitely kind of encourage, is sort of think big, and then when you get told to scale it down to a press ad, you should be able to kind of scale down to that, but start as big as you want, basically.
I think it also shows the strength of
now I'm going to let you do the talking.
No, I was going to say, I think it shows the strength of the idea as well, how much you can scale it up and down as well. If you've got an idea and you can't imagine it in a multitude of different formats, maybe either the idea just belongs in that one, or maybe the idea isn't strong enough and we need to rethink it.
Just had to turn the kettle was on. Kev's got a question coming up.
Oh yeah, well, I've got a couple actually, but before I do, I've noticed that Alaya from Year 1 has put a question in the chat, so I'll ask hers first because she's not well.
Thanks, Kev.
What aspect of your jobs do you enjoy the most? To each of you.
Nate, do you want to go first?
No, I'm still thinking. You can go first.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, no, great question. For me, I mean, getting to see a process from start to finish, I think, is the beauty of my job. Being able to get for a client to come to me and go, this is our business issue, this is what we need to achieve, how are you going to creatively solve that? And then being able to see the strategist take that brief, unpick it, get a proposition that then the creative teams can just explore, expand, bring this to life in a way that you never even imagined it to be, and then the designers and the studio, enhancing it and putting it up. And as Nathan said, I still don't think you can ever get bored of seeing your work live, whether it's on TV, whether it's on a poster, whether it's in print. I think just for me, just that entire process is always exciting, no matter who the client is, and I absolutely love it every time.
I think my part, I really do enjoy the collaborative nature of being a creative, working within a creative department with other like-minded people who want to do great work the same as you, and the highs and lows that come with that as well. It's the crushing lows of having something go to the final person, then just because someone sat in their ivory tower doesn't particularly get it, it all just comes crashing down and you feel about this big. But then the opposite of that, but then you've then got your team, so yes, take the piss out of you because it's funny at the same time, but also motivate you to think, well, it's all right, it's one brief, go again with it. But then at the opposite end of the scale of that is when something starts, like you say, the taking over tube ad, when that starts to look like it can happen, the buzz that generates and the energy in like a creative department and everyone just thinking, I want to work on this, I want to make this happen.
Cheers. Right, I've got a few of my questions now. So you talked a lot about you talk about time and restrictions, which I've got a couple of questions that kind of link based on the fact between what we're able to teach at uni and what the real world's like. So obviously you talked a lot about time restrictions, like having just hours to get an ad to press and stuff like that. What advice would you give to students who've maybe got weeks or months just on one brief? So they've almost got the opposite problem.
Yeah. I think Oh, it sounds like such a cliche thing to say, but don't spend too much time. Just if you have, 4 weeks on a brief, don't wait until midway through the 3rd week to then go, oh, here's what I've got. What do you think of it? As soon as you think you've got something that you like the idea of, you think might go somewhere. Sure, it doesn't necessarily have to be with tutors. It can be with other people in your classes. But just because as soon as I think you find when you say things out loud and you share with people, you then realise the potential it's actually got. Because you can gauge people's reaction. People go, oh, actually, I'm not so sure I understand it, or no, it's crap, or actually, I really like it. Once you know that and what you've got a feel of what other people might think of it, is when you can start fine tuning things, or is it a start again job, or can you, just change bits here and there. But don't wait, don't wait until the day before to think, here's what I've got. It doesn't necessarily have to be within the first few hours. Spend a bit of time on it, but the sooner you get it out there and start sharing it with people, the sooner things start to fall into place, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would also just say it's all cliches in advertising, really, but just don't overthink it. Quite often, what you may come up with first is probably the best thing that you'll ever come up with, potentially. So grab that idea, nurture it, as Nathan says, speak to people about it, and see what they think. But because if you look at the best advertising, it's often a very simple communication, and so the more you kind of try and delve into it and unpick it, sometimes you could end up ruining the thought. So don't overthink it, and yeah, talk it out.
Cheers. Right, I've got a question specifically for you, Alice. That's okay.
Yeah.
Obviously on the course for creative advertising, and we're based around producing copywriters and art directors and things like that. We probably don't get the chance to speak enough to people who do your job. So given you've got the audience of the next generation of creatives coming up behind you, what's the one big thing you could tell a creative now that would make your job easier?
I like the people that I love to work with are the people who are just so relentless in their energy and enthusiasm for what they're doing. I think the people who I love creatives who understand also the fact that I know that it's your idea and you want to protect that idea as much as possible. But in order for this team to work and to get that live, for creatives to also have really understood what the client brief, like what that brief was originally, and always be cross-checking against what the brief was, because at the end of the day, my job is to go and help sell that idea in. And if that creative idea, as much as you love it, if it doesn't answer their brief, they can't buy it. So don't be so protective of your idea that you're not willing to let it kind of be molded and work for that client, because that's what's going to get your work live. So fight for your work, though. I mean, I really like creatives that fight for what they believe in, but also at the end of the day, don't fight so hard and be so precious that actually, I need you to let it go sometimes, so that we can kind of mold it and work and evolve it together to get it across the line. But so that's a million different things I've just said. I appreciate that, but ultimately, passion is, again, another cliche. I said it's all cliches, but be passionate, but be flexible and understand the wider job that everyone has to do to make this happen. And then ultimately the team will help get the best idea over the line.
Cheers. I think it was 5 years before someone told me that. I think I'd have got on with a lot more account people if someone had told me that at year one.
Yeah, good. Oh, good. Well, I hope it was helpful. It's helpful.
Last one from me to both of you, and it's more out. Obviously, we're quite lucky because you've both worked agency side and you've both worked in-house, kind of different places. So I think on creative courses, especially, whether it's graphics, whether it's advertising, purely just because it helps shape a narrative, we're very guilty of almost like fetishizing agencies, traditional network agencies and agency life. And, we talk a lot more about that, and maybe we don't give in-house enough coverage and credit. How would you describe the differences to students between working for an agency and working in-house, really, when you've got, because I think we don't make enough of the fact that in-house is, you know, on a par with, if not better than working at an agency. So I just wonder because you've both done both, what your thoughts are on that.
I think, I don't know whether this is necessarily right, but it certainly seems that when you're in-house, there's a lot less of like the political side of things. And what I mean by that is a lot of like the bigger agencies are, you know, they're owned by, it's a network of things rather than just one small like agency. And it can be like, you know, oh, it's the start of a new year, here's a vision that we've got. So, you know, someone that you've never heard of and you never had any interaction with has decided this is the thing. And then the entire agency sort of shapes itself around that. Whereas certainly like in-house at Pulse, we just sort of, yes, like the AND partnership, who are our owners, may have those, but we sort of distance ourselves from it because we don't really have to deal with that kind of things.
Yeah, I would say what's the beauty of in-house, and it's certainly a model that I think is becoming more popular because certainly with budgets getting tighter with brands, they're actually quite like the idea of having an in-house agency. I guess the kind of the plus side of them going to an external agency is that they can get competitive creatives kind of fighting for their best ideas, whereas you're kind of using the same people over and over again in-house. But actually the strength of having an in-house agency is that you get to really dissect those brands that you're working on. So Nathan and I work on, and I know we've listed a few that we work with within news, but I've never worked on a brand that I know better and know better over a sustained period of time than I do working at news now. So the amount that I know about TalkSport is something I would never have learned if I was external. I'm living and breathing that brand every day because I'm with the clients. I can hear what's on the radio. I can see what they're doing. I can see the challenges that they're dealing with over the next 6 months and in the next 6 hours. So it's that, you know, and being able to understand the brand at that level allows you the opportunity to come up with, you know, very proactive ideas or anything that's reactive that you've heard, and therefore kind of maybe get the opportunity to do advertising on stuff that maybe wasn't in the pipeline or wasn't in the plan because it's just there and it can happen. Whereas, you know, an external agency, potentially you just need more forward thought, or there's less, you know, it has to go through a certain amount of processes or something because you're very separate. But the benefit of an in-house agency is that depth of knowledge of understanding and the opportunities that approach you, like the example Andy gave of that tube station, that may need to have been set up in a presentation. You put that meeting in, it goes through, and so it just, sometimes life just works a little bit quicker in-house, and there's a benefit, plus and negatives of both, but those would be my key differences for sure. Cheers.
Right, I'm going to give way on the floor now. Thanks very much, that was brilliant. I'll hand back to Guy. Cheers.
No worries.
Okay, thanks. Carolus, do you have another question, or have you just still got your...
Yeah, I forgot to click it out, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's why I never use that, because I always forget. Any more questions from anybody in the group?
It might seem like an obvious thing to say, but if anyone wants to look us up on LinkedIn or whatever and fire us questions outside of this space, then please feel free.
Yeah, Guy's got both of our emails, so we'll, you know, get in touch if there's anything. Obviously, it's a bit of not the most ideal situation to be asking questions, so feel free if something comes to mind to fire it over, and we'll do our best to get back to you.
No, it's a good suggestion, because quite often you think, oh, I should have asked that, and you didn't at the time. And it's like with interviews, when you forget to ask something. Yeah. Okay, well, listen, thank you so much for your time, and Andy as well. He's still with us there, isn't he, in the group? And hopefully we can catch up again in the future sometime. You know, if there's any project coming up, or if you'd like to comment on some work we might show you. Yeah,
was opportunity for it.
That'd be really, really, really useful.
I think I owe you a pint anyway, Nathan. I got in such a state after I left you last time. Oh, there's a horrible story about that. I'll tell you next time.
Looking forward to it.
Was this Kevin London by any chance?
Kevin London escaping the tier 3 so we could come and have a pint way back when.
I think the tears have brought us to tears, basically. I don't even know what it is anymore. Well, it's just a proper lockdown, isn't it? Now, is that right? Or
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I wonder if you can have a lockdown on a lockdown, if it gets any more, perhaps.
I'm sure they'll find a way.
Listen, thanks again, and feel free to join the talks. You've got the links, have you, to the other talks tomorrow? And Theodora and Melina will be talking on Friday morning. Two other ex-graduates from Uclan. Yeah.
Great.
Okay, well, thank you everyone, and thanks
for listening, guys. Good luck with the rest of the year.
Thank you.
We'll see you soon. Bye.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Take
Thank you very much.
Bye bye. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Round of applause.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thanks.